Okay, let's start in a simple way. Three topics. One topic is about the current issue in our cultural tourism development. And the second, I would like to positioning our idea about creative tourism, because more than 5 country delegates mentioned about you want to develop creative type of tourism. So the third part, I would like to share a little bit of my new fieldwork finding in the island of Japan, near Okinawa, the Amami Island. They have some really interesting socially embodied cases, as well as art tourism and content tourism in Japan. So let's start from the current issue in cultural tourism. As we know, Japan, like our delegate from India mentioned, one district, one product. Back to 1970, Japan already started one village, one product movement. That's the result. That's the artisanship map of Japan. As we can see, each area try to promote their local culture. Like Kokeshi in the north part is Joseph Sensei really like to collect those artifacts. Then the GNTO, Japan National Tourism Organization, really try to promote cultural tourism for the next 5 to 10 years as their main strategy. Last week, I visited Iwate Prefecture. If you like Japanese tea ceremony culture, you will know tea ceremony consists by not only one artifact. It's with an iron teapot, with a bamboo chasen making, as well as a lot of pottery objects all over Japan. So therefore, to maintain this kind of craftsmanship is already very challenging for nowadays world. In 40 years, Japan lost 80% of this artisanship, alongside with artisanship income. But under this background, Japan tried really hard to promote cultural tourism. But this is not the only challenge Japan is facing. Another challenge is the population. Like yesterday, from the Korean cases, we started to talk about degrowth. How to do tourism under the degrowth context is a valuable experience for all other countries in Asian Pacific. So right now, the colored area will be disappeared in 15 years. This is a serious situation, which means the regional culture will also lost during this process. At the same time, let's look at Japan's tourism number. This number already passed before COVID-19. So we can see report from Japan Times, Kyoto, Tokyo, Osaka, especially this year in Osaka, received more tourists than they actually can receive. Then, who visited Kyoto in recent 2 years? Several people. If you visit Kyoto 10 years ago, you will see a very authentic Kyoto. But now, this is a Kyoto last year. I often tell my students, we have to think about how tourists destroy the place they love. They are not do this on purpose, but that's the result. Stickers by local business, especially the left one. You cannot do this and that, but you have 10 ways to pay your money. They want your money, but you have to follow their rules, right? But this is not only limited by local business. Let's pay attention. Kyoto City official launched the sticker campaign. It's called the Please Respect Kyoto. And they believe this is a sustainable tourism practice. How sad is that? Who wants to enjoy a city full of prohibited mark? You can't touch the geisha, you can't eat on the street. Can you imagine how people destroy this beautiful city? Kyoto is not the worst case. The worst case of unsustainable tourism and unsustainable city come from Hokkaido, where I'm located. Yubari City. After 1970s, closing of mine industry, the whole city want to promote tourism. This is the result of their tourism development after 40 years. After the tourism failure, they built a big-scale theme park, big-scale ski resort, as well as international film festival back to 1990s, but it's failed. After that, they tried to try the other strategies, automobile industry, older care industry, all failed. Yubari is the first case in Japan demonstrate a government, a city government can bankrupt because of unsustainable tourism practice. So because of this and that kind of issue, over cultural tourism in Kyoto and unsustainable result of U-Bali, academics start to make a beautiful theoretical framework to reach sustainable practice, green tourism. Then recently we have a more responsible tourism, restorative tourism, even regenerative tourism. A research published last year really showed us how destination can reach a more regenerative future. So, based on this framework, community co-creation and local wellness play really a central role into the creative tourism framework, which I want to talk about in the next part. I don't want to show you a very complicated theory. Let's just think about the culture and sustainability in 3 steps. First, like the practice in Kyoto, culture in sustainability. Let's pay attention to this photo. A tourist from China really like to take a photo with a geisha, but let me tell you, the geisha is also a tourist. So they're using culture symbol to entertain tourists. This is typical way of thinking from 10 years ago, culture as a pillar of sustainability. But let's take another example, like Shirakawa-go. It's designed by my colleague, World Heritage Site in Japan. So Shirakawa-go itself is a culture, a way of living. In this case, culture defines social, culture defines economy, culture defines their living environment. If you break it, Shirakawa-go will not exist anymore. Local people still living inside. So in this case, the whole town, conservation and well-being in the center. But today I want to share something about the future trend, which means culture as sustainable development. What do we do in that case? The whole destination is a culture, including tourists themselves. I will explain this part later. So based on this kind of framework, we can also see other cultural tourism scholars like Greg Richards try to put cultural tourism 1.0 to 4.0. Our majority destination are remain at 2.0, 3.0. Like we have a question about social media. That's a typical issue caused at cultural tourism 3.0. Let me give a very simple example of a sake creative economy in a very small town called Saijo in Higashi Hiroshima City. At the beginning, they only have a Nihonshu sake as a product. Then the next step is very easy. Everybody try to make souvenirs. We give a little bit extra value. For example, when Obama visited Hiroshima, Abe was serving him this sake. Then the price getting double. Tourism souvenirs with Obama's face on the sake bottle. Then the third stage, we start our cultural tourism 2.0 by receiving a certain amount of visitors, let them stay a little bit. So therefore, hotel, restaurants, based on the sake, they invented sake hot pot, for example. At this point, most of the destinations are following this model. This will cause over-tourism, this will cause commercialization. But next stage is what Professor Qingyi mentioned about the staged experiences. We started using the sake brewery to welcome the tourists, let them to enjoy the site, meanwhile the culture. Also, at this stage, Saijo created the sake festival, one of the biggest sake tasting event in Japan. What about the next stage? That's my question to everybody. Where is the future trend we should keep going? We want to keep adding value, but do we want more people at this stage? The next stage, which we call the cultural tourism 4.0, a creative transformation. How do we do that based on what we already have? Okay, one typical example, we're back to the core theory of creative tourism. In the last 10 years, people still talking about co-creation, but nowadays co-creation is not the center anymore. The center is learning. Learning means meaning making. We have to give more meaning to the destination. They are not come here to consume even interaction. They need to learn a lot. They bring a story back to their friend, for example. One sake example is like, okay, we pay attention to the picture on the left side. They are brewery masters. Their main job is making sake, is not entertain tourists. At this stage, non-tourism stakeholder move into the front stage. They sharing knowledge to tourists. But pay attention to the left up picture. Tourists at this stage, they are not just consumed. They also need to give feedback to match the bad food pairing, which sake pairing with what kind of food. They provide feedback back to the sake maker. So this is a co-creation. It's not like tourists just sit here and enjoy. So both sides have the roles. Non-tourism stakeholder with learner together. I wouldn't call them visitor at this stage. In summary, the future direction, we have to focus on the differentiated consumption instead of something everybody can buy. This is very important. But from the right side, co-creation is better than just focus on product base. Product is important, but we need a very creative solution to solve those products. That's the way to move to 4.0 or even 5.0. So in summary, a lot of delegates this morning mentioned about small-scale micro-entrepreneurship. That's totally creative tourism framework. We also need to pay attention on the learning and value-making part. That's the difficult part because it's involved with the non-tourism industry and stakeholders. And also after COVID-19, our research really shows small is a new big. When the big-scale museum and cities shut down, people tend to visit those less favorite area, but this area has more potential to be more small and diversified future. A little bit complicated, but not that difficult. We separate culture into high culture, pop culture, and everyday culture. They really match with a different type of more passive form tourism, 2.0 to 3.0. But in future, we need to focus on the upper side, more active form of creative tourism. So I will spend the next part, I will focus on this part. More socially embedded tourism. Most of you talk about community-based cultural tourism, that's totally fine, but we need to move forward to the next stage. Next stage, cultural tourism 4.0 already emphasized it must be a hybrid experiences with a co-creation. At this stage, tourism is not a consumer anymore, or not a visitor anymore, they become a creator. They're using for example, using social media to recreate stuff. And what about 5.0? There's no fixed answer here. I can't just tell you what is 5.0. I would say it's more relational kind of approach with the destination. I will give example. I don't give a clear definition here. 3 cases from Japan, from my field. One is new type of socially engaged, community-embedded art tourism, contents tourism in non-urban area, as well as socially embedded tourism in one case study from Amami Island. By the way, we can see from art side, art is moving out of the museum. We displace creativity into places. So in this case, visitors will visit and consume this art. But the goal is not only art, they actually come to help the community. They facilitate micro-entrepreneurship. It's not simple top-down and bottom-up story. I call it new indulgence. I will explain that later. And content tourism, by the way, the guy in the yellow clothes, that's me. I'm trying to learn how to do cosplay and blend with young people in the one biggest cosplay event. How we're making culture into a place has nothing. We started making culture for this place. And the third, I would talk about 70% tradition and 30% innovation. That's how revitalization plays roles, not only development. Development you can do 100% new, but revitalization means something different. First, art festivals in Japan in the recent 25 years, they really expanded to 100 small-scale or big-scale, mega-scale art festival in non-urban area. For example, Celebrity Tsunami brings 1 million tourists in 100 days into a lot of community has not even have a hotel. Imagine this kind of destination receive 1 million people. So first, art interwent rural areas. They bring visitor flows. They bring international, global famous artwork, similar like a Korean case. At the second stage, there are 2 directions. We have to pay attention. We don't really show the best cases. In the worst cases, it's only tourism development. There is no community level of a response. But in the good scenario, some of the community really shows they adapt this change. They create bottom-up business based on the top-down art tourism umbrella. Then, It's a new endogenous circle. It's not simple top-down and bottom-up. You have to think about local and extra-local interaction by time. The community can find a way to recover based on what they have. Content tourism, for example, they have so many different forms. Using local historical assets, have a thematic tour, or Hollywood Oscar award movie can really trigger a destination, or like the cosplay case, building a town from not really strong local culture, like Hokkaido. We have only 100-year history, so they bring new history and culture. You don't need to remember this, just all the research from art tourism and content tourism all match with the creative tourism core. Learning, co-creation, active form of consumption. Let's move a little bit forward. How do we collaborate with the community, mutual our support, and also share our outcome with different stakeholders? My trick is, if you want to do revitalization, 70% of tradition with a 30% in innovation. I finished my fieldwork in Amami Oshima, very close to Okinawa. There is one local entrepreneur tried to do, I wouldn't call that tourism. It's very mixed. Let me explain. On the left side, he tried to save local regional culture. Like our previous case, 70% of local product, right? In this case, he did 100% local artisan crop from Amami Island. On the right hand, they want to renovate abandoned houses. Japan has so many abandoned houses. If you don't save it in short time, they will just back to nature. So because of this, they do not build any new hotel. They invite local construction workers to renovate everything local abandoned. 100% upcycle development. Therefore, you can't find the same room on the island. 44 accommodation on 3 islands. They really show their power start from small. Because some of the house is totally isolated, some house they share with the local people, so therefore you can choose. You want a peaceful Tokyo people come here to do remote work, or you want to live with a local grandma to enjoy their local cuisine and learn about local stories. Most importantly, this is the same site. They renovate a small local school. On the left side is a local craft market, 100% Amami-made product by local artists. If you're looking at the right side, is an elderly house. Elderly people, you're just greeting them in this public place. It's like in the old time, we want to bring tourists to consume this kind of product, but now they need some tourists to entertain the local people. It's totally opposite. So in this case, we can see the power of mixed business in small kind of destination. Show their tourism business side as well as non-business side. A little bit the simple finding, we accept the business side, non-business side. We also can see their relational side and destination side. So therefore, we should pay more attention on the social enterprise side, socially embedded network function to design our future tourism development, because there is always community first. It's related to creative enhancement, is also creative displacement. And at this part, everybody should create a place everybody can enjoy, not only tourists or local. So let me recap what I just presented today. First, we kind of find out what is the current issue of our tourism development in cultural tourism in Kyoto, and also tourism can also destroy a city in Yubari, Hokkaido. So we talk about conventional tourism to regenerative tourism. A second part really demonstrates the power of culture in sustainability, culture for sustainability, and culture as sustainability. In the last part, I shared about socially embedded practice in Japan, always from small scale. It's a new endogenous process. We don't talk about top-down and bottom-up anymore. We talk about the cycle. If destination can grab their chance with a top-down development, they can develop bottom-up as well. So last, I share about the network behavior, 70% tradition, 30% innovation. That's a very sustainable pace to revitalization and building resilience. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Awesome. There's a lot there, and we can allow some time for questions. Does anybody have anything they would like to speak to that or ask a question of? As we can see, speaking about the future of cultural tourism, we're trying to, in many ways, reshape and unlearn what we know about cultural tourism in order to move forward, right? 4.0, 5.0, soon there'll be 6.0. But this idea as tourists, not as passive recipients of culture, but as active participants in shaping the culture that's put forward to them. So, does anybody have any questions? I think this session generates ideas about looking forward, innovation, enterprise, and all of those buzzwords we hear. But the three positions there, reframing, positioning, and towards socially embedded tourism, I think is particularly important, right? Culture changing, the 70-30 rule about keeping some things, letting some things go, because we know that as we develop tourism to a greater extent, there's a give and take taking place. There are trade-offs taking place. How do we ensure that we keep the things that are most valuable, and then let the things that are not as valuable go if we have to? So, to the floor. Anyone with a question? Jung Yoon at the back. Will it reach?
Thank you, Mo, for your very insightful presentation. I learned a lot, and I have a question about distribution channels. So we have a lot of abandoned home in not urban areas, and then even we change and transform that home to our cultural accommodation, then the question is how to reach out to the broader market or consumers. So, do you see any future trend for a distribution channel? That's my question.
Thank you very much for your question. That's a very excellent question. During my 10 years field work in Japan, I'm also looking for answer. It's not easy. Japanese rural community people, if you are not living there, they are not really actually willing to provide their abandoned house, even it's collapsing, because they will often see, after 6th generation, my grandparents give this house to me, and I give it to my children, but it's end up there. So it's my fault with my ancestors. And also I bring trouble, I bring strangers to my community, I trouble my neighborhood. So how do we do that? That's one challenge. Now in Japan, the government also have a similar program, probably like Korea. They call the Regional Revitalization Corps, called the GP, Okoshi Kyokutai. This by sending random young people into different destinations. But some of them engage with the tourism. They can build really good relationship with the local, they earn trust. Then local allow them to do tourism. But in other case, some people doesn't work very well. They trouble with the local people and they do not have local support. So in this case, co-creation and local trust is very important. And another case I couldn't explain a little bit further, like this can you open it? The accommodation in Amami Oshima, they provide a really diversified, I will go to the last one. They provide a really diversified price range for young people to travel. For example, they have really luxury resorts, like this one on the left side. You can have your own private beach, probably 5 families, 5 different beach. You can also have your own tea ceremony room just for your family in the weekend. But at the same time, they have a karaoke room. They have guest house, hostels. It's like you just pay a few thousand yen, you can enjoy. So this case really shows they give tourists an option. You can pay more for the community, but you can also stay in a cheap price range. Both ways you support the community with a low carbon footprint. Yeah, but on other places, if is outside developer. They will build hotel. They will build beach resort and local, especially Amami Oshima. They protest it. They don't want a hotel, but they are very welcome this kind of very resourcefulness behavior using what they already have. It's better using it than back to the nature. That's my finding, a little bit shaky, but I don't have a further answer for that. I hope it's okay.
Okay, thank you, Jungyun, for your question. The twin issues of enhancement versus displacement is a really interesting one to think about when we think of tourism. The statement that Mo-san made in relation to Kyoto about tourists destroying the very thing they go to see is a reality, right? How do we as policymakers deal with that? But to you, Alex, for your question.
Well, I just want to ask the 70 plus 30%. Does it mean, it really depends on the people who will be reading and interpret the figure. I really don't know if you have like a deeper study, particularly in terms of the numbers. Because looking at, as a devil's advocate, 70% plus 30% is 100%. Meaning the 30% is actually the deviation from the norm. And that's actually somehow, in terms of conservation, reservation, the 30% is no longer there. That's why you only have 70, and then you put the innovation, which is 30%.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. I don't know if everybody noticed the day before when we have the welcome dinner, there are 3 traditional Mongolian instruments playing with a 1 cello. That's also 75 and 25. There is no fixed number, but that's the modern transition. Young generations, everybody like that. This funding is actually from the developer because they are architect background. They say there's always rules if you want to renovate architect. Traditional houses in Japan, 70% is what you must keep, and 30% is what you want to replace against an earthquake or something.
So it's more on the physical attributes.
Yeah, but I think for intangible cultural heritage, it also applies because you need a reason to bring young people back. Yesterday, Mr. Bangladesh asked me, how do we bring young people back? This 30% plays really important role. How do we use this 30% to attract them back, to making job and money?
Okay. All right, any other questions? I think the 70-30 approach to cultural tourism also raises this question that typically when we talk about culture, particularly to traditional culture, there is a sense that it shouldn't change, right? But we know that culture is constantly evolving. You know, new uses for old culture is something that is a reality. If we expect it to be museumified, then it's not living culture, right? So these are important provocations for us to have. Anybody else with the question? We've got a few more minutes before we go to the country presentations. Anyone? Please go ahead. Jungyun?
Yeah.
The other one.
Thank you. I'm looking for the souvenir ecosystem because souvenir is really important in cultural tourism, and also it's really important like giving the local the beneficial economic benefits. But in Korea, not as Japan, we have a lot of souvenirs, and we encourage locals to make more traditional souvenirs by like government grant program. But it's really hard to make that cheaper so that tourists can buy and that could be invested and make the locals more rich. Yes, but I think Japan is the great example of making great souvenirs and local traditional souvenirs in the cost-effective prices. So I want to know the process of policy making of that kind of souvenir ecosystem.
Thank you very much. I will back to this slide. There is one slide about definition of creative tourism to answer this question. This one. This is a typical example of how to allow tourists to learn Shirakawa's traditional architect, but you cannot build a house by demonstrating them. So therefore, the local tourism organizations think about just by making a small keychains. It takes like 5 to 10 minutes just to show them how the wooden structure works. Then the goal is not just allow them to buy an experience. They have to carry a story back. They will show their friends, I made this. Then they can tell them how traditional houses been made in rural Japan. I think that's what Japanese, each region, each destination, each DMO really try to work really hard, how to transform a product into a story. We're back to the meaning making again. So the current policy, this start, like I mentioned, one village, one product back to 1969 from Oita Prefecture. Then on tourism planet, they really tried really hard. Then they realized, okay, tourists are not really satisfying on buying anymore. They want to come for experience. How to make a very complicated culture, traditional skill into something you can experience in 5 to 10 minutes, also with the kids. That's very important. So they really spend a lot of time for that. I don't know about the cost performance, but I think this is really attract international tourists nowadays. But the challenge for Japan to do this, most of the craftsmen who can make this, they can't speak English well. So their challenge is about communication. Yeah, I believe the AI will solve that kind of problem. Hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Mo-san. We have time for one more. You want to go ahead? If anyone first in will ask the question, okay? Please go ahead.
I have a lot of interest in Japan's souvenir system. So I heard that I think your answer is really insightful because making experiences for the traditional souvenir for the international tourists is important. But I heard that the government's role is also important in making the souvenirs, not just fostering the DMOs or the locals, because I think this is kind of like, it's really important, but for us, it's kind of ideal. So we have to be like practical for the, I think long term must be ideal, but the short term, it's kind of need to be practical. So, well, we had a survey for some of the international visitors, and they said that expensive souvenirs is too expensive because of the cost and price of the souvenir. We couldn't want to buy some of the very traditional and beautiful artisans' crafts, and that. So I heard that one of the solution that Japan government have is that making the festival, like you said, sake festival, and making the souvenir of the festival more make a approach to the international visitors, because when we focus on the souvenir, when we focus on the festival, we could like get more international visitors, and they could make more mass. They could sorry, broken English. They could make mass manufacture, so that they could make the cost effective. So Japan's government are making some kind of law, and it's related to the souvenir festival promoting law, and that includes the making souvenir with the festival. So I think that is really important point. So I want to know the process of making the law in the government of the souvenir and festival of the souvenir.
Thank you very much. Based on my humble knowledge, I think like 10 years ago, Japan never started the destination management local DMOs. Recent 10 years, the DMO tried to pop up, especially my center is training DMO managers. Based on this, each destination decide their own policy to do what kind of promotion, promote what kind of event. Very complicated. Japan Convention Bureau is taking care of event management, but the local tourism development belongs to tourism association. In Hokkaido case, we have the third organization taking another thing. So it's a 3 organization collaborate. For domestic tourists, there is a new policy like the hometown tax system. You can pay tax by supporting buying local food, agricultural product, or crop. So it equals tax paying to support local tourism, craftsmen, or industry. That's one thing I can share. And I think there is no central policy to apply into all destinations. Therefore, each event management convention bureau, MICE, and also the tourism association and with the DMO, they work together. DMO's role is more on the monitoring and evaluation and giving feedback, also including design tour package. They will deliver it to government after their evaluation. That's how the system works. I think that's, I don't know, maybe later I can explain more to you.
Okay, unless anyone has another burning question or comment for, well, can we please thank him for his very impressive. Okay, let's get into our country presentations.